All right, thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to give it about 30 seconds to let everyone kind of pile into the room. We'll have some people joining us. Thank you for your patience.
Ok, ya empezó el Zoom.
All right, and I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves because we can hear when you're talking in the background if you're not muted. So if you're not talking, please mute yourself. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I see some people saying good morning in the chat. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Math Strategies for ABE and GED. I wanted to first thank the Florida Department of Education for making this possible. And this webinar is hosted through the Florida Literacy Coalition. So before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping things. As you can see, the chat is already pretty active. So, you can please feel free to use the chat to input comments or questions. If you have any questions that you want to put in the chat, we will kind of put those aside. So if it's not answered right away, we will answer it at some point. I'll be reading the questions that you put in the chat aloud to our presenter. Sorry, we've got some more people coming in. Let me just let them in right now. Hello, welcome to those of you who just came in.
She knows, we talked about that.
Please mute yourself if you are not speaking. Okay. All right. So another thing is that I would like to encourage you to unmute yourself, even though I just muted a few people. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and talk to the presenter. If you have any technical issues, put that in the chat and I will answer it privately so it doesn't affect the flow of the session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter today, Rebecca De Jesus. So Rebecca has a decade of experience in math and adult education and has always been interested in technology in the classroom. So Rebecca loves finding new and fun resources to utilize with students and fellow teachers. She spends her days teaching ESOL classes, and she also teaches ABE and GED classes. Rebecca has also been a partner with FLC for years now. She's presented at our conferences, and she's helped develop our GED math page and app. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Rebecca.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and it's so good to be here with you this morning, and welcome to this Math Strategies webinar. I have so much for you this morning that I know that I'm going to speak very quickly, but you will have my email and you also have a copy of the entire PowerPoint, which includes all the resources that I'm going to name in it. So it'll be a good reminder if you need that later. And if you would like to reach out to me at any time to clarify anything that I say, I'm happy to communicate with fellow adult educators. Like Nicole said, I've been in the adult ed game for the most of my career, and GED in particular is the love of my working life. So I love working with GED students, and math in particular is my favorite thing to teach. So I'm going to dive right in, and I'm going to try to watch the chat. You'll see me looking over here because I'm working with two screens, but if I can address your questions as I go, but if not, like Nicole said, we'll catch them at the end. So we'll give you everything that I am sharing this morning will be in the PowerPoint, and if you have any questions, we'll clarify. I'm going to talk a little bit about TABE versus GED, really drill into some of those specific types of questions that students are going to encounter. We're going to talk about those most missed question areas. I'll talk a lot about technology because I love using technology to make my job easier. I'm going to talk about print resources. I know some of you are working in settings where you can't use computers with students, so we definitely have stuff for you too. Just some general student engagement ideas that we've really enjoyed doing in our ABE and GED classrooms, and just some quick productivity tools for teachers that I absolutely love. So that's a quick scope of what we're going over this morning, and I'm going to jump right in. So just to talk about the TABE versus GED, a lot of what we did when I was working on a team of 3 GED teachers is really try to analyze the data and see how we were going to move our data. So the TABE as it stands, you've got the picture on your screen. It gives you an idea of what's covered on the E, M, and D levels of the TABE, the easy, medium, and difficult levels. And what I like about the new TABE, the TABE 11, 12 versions, is that it's a little bit closer to what students are going to encounter on the GED, but some of us agree that it's even harder than some of the questions on the GED. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I've highlighted in red some of those areas on the D level that I think are really applicable to the GED, those multi-step word problems, the statistics areas, all those areas that are talking about shapes like area, perimeter, circumference, volume, surface area. Pythagorean theorem, of course, shows up on every math test. Exponents, roots, and scientific notation. Integers, of course, is big. That's where they're going to lose points because they're going to leave one negative sign off when they're doing computation. Ratios and proportions are big. The coordinate plane, graphing, and slope. Functions, slope-intercept form is big, and percents, discounts, tax, and markups. You're going to see a question or two about that. So you'll see a couple things on that D level that are in black, and you won't explicitly necessarily see all of those things on the GED. They could be there. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of those levels that we're looking at for the TABE. I have not seen any GED teachers who are looking for that A-level test anymore, because we kind of agree it's a little out of the range of where we need our students to be functioning. So that's why I left that one off. So when we're specifically looking at GED kind of breaks their math down into 4 content areas: the basic math, the geometry, basic algebra, and graphs and functions. And later on, when I show you one of our resources, you're going to see these same areas. And if I could say the big things that any GED math teacher should be hitting would be problem solving with whole numbers. And when I say problem solving, I really mean word problems. In the geometry section, we've got to be able to find side lengths when given area and perimeter. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how we're going to start encountering those types of questions. And linear equations, expressions, and inequalities to me is number 1. It's something I would teach over and over again throughout the course of a GED math year with students, and I would cycle as my students cycle in and out. Most of us are dealing with rolling enrollment, right? So you're getting new students. So this is something that I would be teaching over and over. And in the graphs and functions section, the number 1 word that I hear students say when they come back from a GED math test is slope. So I think just understanding the scope of the math that their students are up against is important. And if I could say, what is GED math? It's Algebra 1. It's Algebra 1, maybe cutting off some of the very end of the Algebra 1 curriculum and just focusing more on the reasoning skills. Okay, so I just like to talk a minute about data. This is a recent graduate of mine, and I just wanted to show you kind of a TABE versus GED. This is only one example, but you see in here, the student just got what I like to call regular passing scores. She didn't score super duper high on any test, but she passed all of them. She just made it on the RLA and the science. And shortly around this time that she was graduating, she was also taking another round of her TABE tests. So she started all level 2s with us. And then by the end of the program, before she graduated, she was scoring in the level 3 range on the TABE. And you can kind of see that the students that are passing their GED are probably going to be in the level 3 range on the TABE. And I think that that's just important because, of course, this is the data metric that we're getting when students are coming in. So I kind of like to interpret for them, how long will they be in the program? Where do they need to get to be successful? And I'm going to give you my opinion on that in the next couple of slides. But I just wanted to show you this one piece of data because I think it's about consistent with what I see for most students. When I really look at the numbers, I think most students are going to score in these TABE ranges and they're going to be successful on the GED. So I found this resource recently and I thought it was really interesting. This comes from TABE. This comes from, of course, DRC, the owners / makers, developers of TABE. And they themselves are giving out some minimum passing scores that they think you need on the TABE to be equal to that HSE, that high school equivalency level. And for GED, they have selected 537 for the math, which is the low end of level 4. And you'll notice here on the side, they're talking about the M level test. So if we go back to what I originally said, we have easy, medium, difficult, and advanced TABE tests. They're talking about even receiving these scores on the medium level test, and that should predict likelihood of passing the GED. So I just wanted to throw that out there just so as you're meeting your students and you're kind of interpreting data and you're trying to figure out who's ready for what before they go take their real GED test, I think that we can use TABE if we understand the correlation between the two. And DRC has come up with these numbers, and they're about the same for reading, language, and math. And they're talking about the M level test or the D level test. Really, I think A level test is kind of out of the range of what we need. And that college and career ready plus college credit still not something that's running a lot in too many states. I keep looking this up for students, hoping Florida schools will grip onto this, but if they did get those numbers to get college credit from a GED test, and I'm not finding that we're doing it too much yet. So that was just a quick note. Here's my opinion shown on the TABE score chart. I think most of my graduates are going to end up on a TABE level 3 or 4, and that's going to show that they're going to be successful on the GED, RLA, science, and social studies tests. I think most of my graduates will be on level 2 or 3 in math or higher. They could always be higher, but level 2 or 3, I've got a lot of grads that are level 2 math on TABE and they still manage to pass the GED. And for language, I think that's less relevant than the other two, but level 2 or 3 there also. So this is kind of an anecdotal opinion, but I just like to throw some of the data out there because we do see these trends and I've seen them over the course of many, many years. Okay, quick note about those GED Ready scores, and I hope that you are using the GED Ready practice tests with your students because I think they're such great predictors. And like I always tell my students, this is the GED company telling you that you are ready to take their tests. So I think that's a great way of knowing if they're ready. But I just wanted to see how they were playing with the scale scores. So I took the math test and I made sure that I got every question wrong. I made sure I got every single question wrong, and this was my score. So it's 113 points when you get 0 correct. Of course, I think we all know that you need 145 points to pass the test. So if you're seeing students that are getting those 127s, those 135s, 136s, that's a lot farther away from passing than you might think. We can't look at 135 and think, oh, they only need 10 points. No, they're probably pretty far away. They probably didn't get too many questions correct. And I think if I remember accurately, of the failing students on the GED, of the ones that did not pass, it was something in the range of like 80% of them missed the pass by 5 points or less. So, I guess we can say most of the people that did not pass scored in the 139 to 144 range. So even though it sounds like 5 points, we really got to say, okay, you really do want to pass that GED ready. You want to completely pass it, not get a 144 and then go pay for your test, because for some students paying for it over and over again is difficult, and we need to know that. Also on this screen, you see that we have this sample test. I am going to go through a couple questions that I got from here. This is available to you and anybody who wants to take a free little 10-question GED practice test in each subject. And I highly encourage you to do that if you have not done it, because I think it really is helpful to teach students to pass a test if you've had some experience with it. Some of us have taken the GED ready practice tests, which are longer and take more time to do, but these are just 10 questions and they're free and available online. Anybody can look at them. So I think it's very reasonable for teachers to be able to take those, even though they told us maybe we shouldn't take the GED ready test. I always say encourage courage. When a student gets a 144, a 143, even a 136 on a GED ready test, I always make a really big deal about it and say, oh, that's so good. You're close. You need to keep working. You need to keep working, but you are close. That's great. I never try to crush their spirit. I don't necessarily tell them this information about the 113 when you get everything wrong, because I do want to encourage them and kind of try to stamp down some of that test anxiety that they probably have. But just like for the educator's perspective, we need to kind of be aware that a 143 on a practice test does not mean to me that a student should go take the real GED yet. I think they should keep working on it. Okay, so that's kind of some of the housekeeping. Let me go over some of the specific types of math questions and talk about some just general strategies. So I pulled a couple questions from the tape and I just wanted to show that. So I see a question, is it available in Spanish? The official practice test, the GED ready test, is available in Spanish. That's the one that students have to pay $6 for, or some of the schools give out vouchers. This study, this little free 10-question preview test is not available in Spanish. I have looked for it. It's not there. And then we have another question, can you print it? Yes, for the most part, you can print these, but you will need to do some screen printing. The math will be easier to print than the RLA because you're going to have to print and screen print multiple pages. But if you were really looking for them to be printed, it would be possible. You could screen print them. And your school requires a score of 150 for minors. My school district luckily kind of dropped that, so I was kind of I was glad about that. They let our minors test with 145. But I don't disagree that having the 150 on the practice test is a good idea for the minors, because sometimes I think we get our minors out too quickly, and that's not necessarily to their benefit to just send them out into the world before they're ready. So keeping them with us a little longer to get those 150s is probably not a bad idea. Okay, so looking at a specific question, this is from the E-level tape test. So I really just want to bring this up because as I'm talking my way through some of these sample questions, I want to show you just this. This is an E-level, this is the easy level tape test, and it's an area question, but you see that it's a composite figure. We need frequent practice with number sense, just being able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, but it needs to exist within the context of word problems and/or shapes. They need to be able to do some of these things with no calculator. And I just like to make mention of, we find a lot of these nice little worksheets online, and I certainly I will show you a lot of places to get these and recommend using them. But when you compare this very simple area of a rectangle worksheet to what the students are really up against on these tests, those worksheets are not high level enough. So as we go through this journey today in this webinar, I'm going to show you some places where you're going to get those more difficult styles of questioning because they're up against that. And I always say that students who are age 30 and younger, they have seen this style of questioning all through K-12. We test them to death in K-12, and they are used to these hard questions and these hard tests. So they're a little bit more used to unpacking and breaking down questions and seeing more complicated things where they have to apply. But as you are developing what you're working on with students, again, we can start with a worksheet like this, but we need to then continue to move beyond that to get to those more advanced levels so that we're making sure that our students are getting prepared for the test that they actually have to take, especially if they're 30 and older, because when they were in school, they may not have experienced as much of these style of questioning as our younger students. Okay, another question here is just an example of how, here's a computation question. This is an M level test, so this is our medium level. What this really is multiplying fractions, because the question is, what is the area of the rectangle? So you just have to multiply these numbers. So there's our old school multiplying fraction worksheet that we like, that's got 20 questions where they have to multiply fractions. But we do need to make sure that we show that same skill to them in the context of a more difficult looking problem. It's the same skill, they just have to multiply the fraction, but they need to understand that's what they have to do in this question. So in this case, they have to understand area. They need to multiply the fraction, and I can see that it's saying simplest form, so they're going to have to reduce the fraction. So we've got skills layered into these questions, and you're definitely going to see that on the TABE and the GED. And that's another reason why I tell students, not only for our school data, but also just for their own good, I try to make sure I test them every 50 hours on the TABE. Not that some of them care about the TABE or doing well on that, because they don't come to us necessarily to do well on the TABE. They're trying to get their diplomas. But I tell them, this is a good practice for you. It's just practice taking a math test. And the more that you take tests, I think the better that you do, because your test anxiety comes down, you kind of get over the experience of it, you're used to it, and you just go. Remember our K-12 students? I mean, I just finished 7th grade math. We tested our students like 20 times. I mean, we just test them and test them and test them. But our older adults did not come out of an education environment where they were encountering that much. So they may still have that test anxiety and things like that. I love fractions, decimals, and percents. And I've debated with other math teachers because I always wanted to just teach algebra because that's what I really see on the test. But then when we found that when you teach those fractions, decimals, and percents, that number sense that the students get from that is so valuable, and it just makes the other harder things easier. So I do still love those math drills with fractions, decimals, and percents, but I do also encourage you to start with those basic worksheets and then work your way up into the more advanced materials where it's just like this question, same skill, multiplying fractions, but presented in a weirder way. Students have got to be able to deal with that because that's what they're seeing on all the tests. And again, this is a medium level TABE test. Medium used to be pretty easy. These days, I don't think so. Okay, we definitely have a lot of multi-step word problems. I'm going to talk a lot about unpacking today. And in the majority of the GED tests, they have a calculator, but they need to be able to unpack these word problems. Okay, so this is a perimeter question. This is a do you know the Pythagorean theorem? This is multi-layers here. You need to understand not only how to use Pythagorean theorem, you need to understand the vocabulary word perimeter. You need to understand the vocabulary word legs, because in this question, they're saying the legs, you need to know that the legs are not the hypotenuse. So it's just, there's a depth of the level. There is a depth of the level. We cannot just give them that one worksheet that's got the triangles on it with the Pythagorean theorem. We've got to get them to interact with everything in word problems. On the bottom of this screen, you see the link for the practice test that you can check out later. That's where I got these. And again, they're very short. Anybody can look at them. So you're more than welcome to look at them and just kind of have an idea of what students are up against, especially because one of our adult ed data metrics is growth on the tape. So that's part of our job. So if you're looking for a little bit more idea of the scope of the TABE, you can check out the practice test. Oh, thanks for that tip about the 10 question practice test in Spanish. I was just looking for it the other day, so I'm going to look for it. So apparently the sample GED test you can see in Spanish if you toggle the language. Okay, so the next thing that I want to go over are just some of these most missed areas of the GED, and this was developed by Florida IPDE, and they took surveys of tons of students that had either passed the test or just not passed the test. Within that 5-point range, they were really close to passing, and they looked at those students and said, what did those students miss? So these are just some of the areas, and I'm just going to use this to talk more about what do we need to do as teachers to try to get them prepared for this. So I've talked a little bit about this before. Finding side lengths when I give you area. I go back to the example of that simple rectangle area worksheet that I was showing. It's not good enough. We can't just find area. In a lot of questions, they're going to give area. We see an example up here on the top right. They are giving the area, and they are asking you to find the diameter. So let me jump into the GED math reference sheet. Okay, so again, this question was giving us the area of a circle, and they were asking us to find the diameter. So this is the depth that we're dealing with, because the area formula, if the students manage to get to it, is available to them on the GED reference sheet. They are given the area. Now they must find what? They must find the radius, and then they need to know how to convert the radius into diameter. So we're talking about a deep understanding of this formula, how to use it, what the letter R means, and then is that the answer? No, it's not the answer, because the question is asking us to find the diameter. So it's really testing, do you understand what this formula is? It's not that simple little rectangle worksheet that I was showing you. So what I recommend for teachers, because I know that my student attendance is horrible, and if I plan 1 month of lessons, it's not going to work out. Now, here's where you all in corrections are beating the rest of us, because you've got that great attendance, but a lot of us don't have that great attendance. So I would try to start with this simple worksheet if I felt like this is what some of my ABE students needed, because we need to understand the basic concept. But then I'm going to try to take this and move it into the word problems in the same class day. That way I know that everybody that started that lesson at least got exposed to those harder questions, because this question is a little bit challenging. You've got to do 3 things, and I can almost guarantee that when you look at that when you look at the multiple choice answers for this question, the radius will be there, because you're going to find if you use the area formula of the circle, and you're not going to find the diameter. And if you don't take that one extra step, then boom, you're wrong, and you could have been right. So composite figures is a big thing. I have actually never seen a simple shape on any GED practice test. I have seen either composite figures or 3D figures. I've never just seen a square or a circle or anything like that. If it is, it's going to be in the middle of a word problem where they're going to describe a circle or a circular thing, and then they're going to put something like this top right-hand corner. They're not going to give just a picture of a circle and say, find the area. It's just never going to be that simple. And I always tell students, yeah, it's not really going to be that easy. We got to make it a little bit harder so you're ready for it. Okay, this tree trunk question down here in the bottom left comes from the GED sample test. And I always like to use this example because this question is, how many square feet of wrap does she need? We're talking about this green wrap. We've got to read all of this information. We've got to understand that this wrap is in the shape of a rectangle, even though it's wrapped around a tree like a circle. So we've already got to undo this shape and understand it will then be a rectangle. And then we've got to come over here. We've got to get the diameter of the tree. We've got to convert that diameter into the circumference of the tree so that we can figure out the length or the width of this rectangle. Okay, we either height, we have the height here, maybe we're calling it the base, whatever you want to call it. It's a lot in this one little question. It's just a lot of understanding of shapes in this one little real life question. I'm going to talk more about this tree soon in a couple more slides, but I really do encourage you as a teacher to look at those practice tests so that you can see the level of questions, because we have all had students who have been with us all year long in our math classes, and they go take the test and they come back and they say, you didn't teach me anything that was on this test. And you know you did, because you taught the standards, but you have to make sure you're teaching them with those high levels of questioning, because if not, the students just won't know what to do. They won't recognize, they will not see that that's an area question. It doesn't even say the word area. It says square feet on it. I'm going to talk more about that in a couple minutes. Okay, so we have a ton of questions where they have to read graphs, and I cannot say the word slope enough because I think that's really important. How do I teach this graphing section? What I do is I try to stay focused on this GED math reference sheet. This is available for free online. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it or have it or printed it. What I do when I want to teach graphing is I go down to the bottom and I make sure that I cover these 3 areas that are talking about graphing. So I don't know why this won't let me highlight right now. I make sure that I cover the slope of a line, how to find slope. I make sure that I cover slope intercept form, and I make sure that I cover point slope form, and that they know that this is on the reference sheet and how to use that. To me, that's a very important question. I know that they are going to see multiple questions on the test about this. I have many students coming back saying they saw 3 questions about slope. This is an important section of this test. So I make sure that I cover these. There are 2 types of data drop type of things that I like to do with students. I like to make sure that we go over this reference sheet and we talk about these letters. It does not explain most of these, okay? It tells you little p is perimeter of the base and big B is area of the base, but it doesn't tell you R, H, L. It doesn't tell you that. So I like to make sure I go over that with students, and then I like to go over the calculator with them, and I will talk to you about that later. Okay, quick note about these graphs. I always tell students, you have got to read the graph first and understand it, because so many of the questions are testing them on their ability to read a graph. You don't need to read a point on the graph. You need to read the information that is presented on the graph. Okay, they're not necessarily saying, where does this peak? You know, and you just have to say the numbers. They're saying, what is this showing? So I see ibuprofen levels in a patient's bloodstream. I'm breaking down these questions. I'm saying, who has taken ibuprofen? Have you ever had a headache? Have you taken it? Okay, so this is what's happening. I didn't even know this. It releases into your bloodstream, and look at what's happening. The ibuprofen levels are going up when we read the y-axis of this graph. Okay. And then down here, what's on the x-axis? Can you read this to me? Read this to me. It's the time since ibuprofen was taken. Okay, so as we move along this graph, we are passing through time. Okay, so what happened? I see that the ibuprofen levels went way up in the bloodstream, and then they slowly slumped off. As time moved on, the ibuprofen levels started to come back down. And we're reading this graph together before we try to answer the questions, because students don't like to read these 3 little labels. And I always tell them, Guys, it takes like 10 seconds, really 15 seconds. It's only taken me a minute and I've been talking to you about it. If I was doing it by myself, I could have done it faster. I want to make a note about this graph in particular too, because I want you to forget about these labels for a minute and pretend that this is a distance time graph. Because what happens is they'll put distance, like a person's distance from their own home. They will put that on the y-axis and then they'll put time on the x-axis. And so this graph would then show that the distance away from home is increasing because they drove all the way to the mall. And then on their way home, they stopped at the grocery store and the bank and the pool store and their friend's house and wherever. And students will interpret that this graph is like Google Maps and it's showing the way that the car drove. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that it's a distance time graph and it's showing the distance has moved away. They're further away from home and then they slowly started coming back closer and closer to home. So we've really got to get students to be able to read this information on the graph, because if you look at how they have to answer this question, it's not a math question. They have to be able to fill in drop-down menus. If you see on the bottom of the screen, they have to fill in drop-down menus that are explaining what is the information on this graph. It's a reading question. It's not a math question. It's a reading question. They've got to be able to read those graphs. Okay, moving on. Scale factors is on the most missed question. I always talk about scale factors by saying that the good thing about scale factors is that it goes right along with the ratios and proportions. It can go right along with those discounts, tax, percents, markups, markdowns. All of those types of problems can be solved using fraction equals fraction, right? Proportional relationships. And that is such a good skill. You can use fraction equals fraction and set up your proportion to answer so many questions on the GED test. So I love to teach that section and say, hey guys, let's use this to answer this kind of question. Let's use this. When I teach percents, I do is over of equals percent over 100, because I want to have fraction equals fraction. And I want them to keep using that system to solve a ton of these problems. It's also a good way for them to pull information out of a word problem and put it into a box, because I got 4 boxes I got to fill in, or I have to fill in 3 and find the 4th one. So that's a big area that is missed commonly. Okay, I think that I already said expressions, equations, and inequalities are the most important, okay? Expressions, equations, and inequalities are definitely the most important. If you go on that sample test and you take that 10-question sample test, you're going to see that 6 of those questions involve expressions, equations, or inequalities. They must be able to understand the relationship between numbers and letters, numbers and variables. We have to be able to read a number sentence like is shown here and convert that number sentence into words. We have to be able to read word problems and convert it into a number sentence. Here's another picture of the same thing. If we look at the bottom of this screen, this is from that GED sample test. We have this long word problem, right? And the answers are number sentences. So this is making sure that a student is not going to, in a roundabout way, figure out the answer without knowing how to solve equations. They are going to have to understand what the pieces of a number sentence mean to extract the information from this paragraph and be able to answer this question and pick the right number sentence. And like I always tell them, you better pay attention to every piece, because if you look at the first 2 answers and the second 2 answers, the only difference is the way that that inequality sign is facing. What I do when I am teaching students is I say, we are reading very slowly and we are going to unpack this word problem. So here's how I read this with them. Annie is planning a business meeting for her company. Okay, have any of you ever been to a meeting? Have you ever been to a meeting at church or a business meeting? Has your company ever made you go to a business meeting? Okay, some of us have done that. Okay, she has a budget of $1,325. All right, 1325. What is that number? Okay, it's money. What kind of money? It's her budget. Okay. Have any of you ever used a budget before? Have you ever had a budget for something, like you threw a birthday party, or you were planning an event, or you just had to pay bills, so you need to keep your monthly budget? Any of you? Okay, yes, a lot of you, right? Okay, she is going to rent a meeting room at a local hotel. Well, have any of you ever rented a room at a hotel? Okay, a lot of us have done that. Okay, so she's renting a room and providing lunch. Okay, I got it. I see what's happening here. She's going to have a meeting. She's going to provide lunch. She expects 26 people to attend the meeting. Okay, that's another number, 26. What is it? 26 bananas, $26, 26 hours. Okay, it's 26 people who will attend this meeting. Okay, 26 guests. I got it. I understand that's a big meeting. Okay, the cost of renting the meeting room is $270. All right, that's kind of an expensive room, don't you think? I think so, maybe. I don't know. Some of you might think that's not that expensive. Okay, so it's $270 for the meeting room. Okay, and then which inequality shows how to find the amount X that Annie can spend on lunch for each person? X. What is X? It's money. Money for what? Money that Annie can spend on what? Lunch for each person. So, and obviously this took me a while. I would say it maybe a little slower. This is me teaching students, but I am telling them we are not reading a book, guys. We are not reading as fast as we can read. Raise your hand if you have read a math question like this, a paragraph, and then at the end of it, you had absolutely no idea what you just read. Yes, all of us, because we're tired. We don't want to take this test. The test is long. We need to read it slowly. And what I do is I have them write down every single number on scrap paper and write next to the number, what does it mean? And I tell them it takes a minute. You have the time. You have the time to pull that information out of the test, out of the question, so that we can see what we're dealing with. We do not want to keep rereading this paragraph over and over without our brain slowly understanding what we are talking about, because they have to be able to translate this real world situation into a math sentence. So they need to connect to this real world situation. Every single one of us is aware of a hotel. There is some way of us connecting. We've had lunch before. You know, we can connect to this in some way. And I'm getting them to unpack, and that variable, they must tell me what that means. It's a number. What kind of number? In this case, money. Money for what? Money for lunch. We need to connect that that letter it means something. It is a blank box, and in that box we're going to, what does that number mean? We have got to figure out 1325. Is it 1,325 people? We need to know what these numbers mean, and they have to slow down, because they just read it and they say, I don't know, and that's it. No, they got to start pulling apart, because they do know things about money, things about parties, things about lunch. So they need to connect. Okay, here is that same tree. And this on the sample test actually has a couple different questions that go with this same tree. It's 4 paragraphs of information, 4 paragraphs here. Some students are already overwhelmed because this is a lot of words and information. They have to read a graph. Over here, I finally see the question. Okay, it's describing the scientist. There's so much information here that I don't even care about. But over here, it's telling me we're dealing with year 13. We're dealing with tree 1. And it's saying the wrap is price per square foot. So I need to understand that I'm talking about area. I need to, once again, understand that this tree wrap is a rectangle. I need to understand that on this, with all of these numbers over here, I am looking at the graph for tree 1, not tree 2, and I need year 13. And then I'm getting the diameter, and what the heck does that have to do with my rectangle? Oh yeah, because the tree is round and I need to use that diameter to now find the circumference of this tree to find the width of this tree wrap. so that I can find the area of this. The second question on this on the sample test is asking you how much it will cost if you price it per square foot. And so if you didn't get the first one right, you're not getting the second one right. So you have to understand the first part to get to the second part. It's these layers and layers and layers of understanding that is built into this style of questioning that, once again, students who are 30 or older, they didn't necessarily take that many tests where they saw so many layers in one question. And that's what makes the GED test so challenging. They've got to unpack piece by piece. I need to read and see all the numbers in the question and figure out what are those numbers. What do they mean? What is 13? Okay, it's year 13. Where's year 13? Here's year, here's 13. And we've got to get them to read it because they don't want to read it. They don't want to read it. They just want to try to find the answer like this. Our young ones definitely want to do that. The older ones might take more time. We need to get them to break it down. Here's the link again to those free practice tests, and I do encourage you to take a look. Some of them can blow you away. All right. I've been talking about breaking down these word problems, and what I always tell students is, when you get home from a vacation, do you just take your whole suitcase and just dump the whole thing out onto the floor? And everybody says no, because that's not how we take apart a suitcase, and it's not how we can take apart these math problems. You can't just read the whole paragraph at once. This is not reading a book. You need to unpack your suitcase piece by piece, okay? And you need to understand what you got in there. There's two different methods that I've used in the past. Solve, where we just go through this 5-step process. Cubes is the same thing. Whatever one you like is great. Cubes, circle any key numbers. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at these 4 paragraphs of information, and I'm going to read, and I'm going to find all of these numbers. And if it's me and I'm taking a GED math test and I can't circle, I'm going to write down the number 13, and I'm going to write down what it is. It's year 13. Okay, I'm going to make my students write it down on scrap paper so we can understand those numbers. And that's what we're going to do in this first step. Underline the question. Okay, we got to go back. We got to go back here. We've got 4 paragraphs of information. The question is right here, the end. How many square feet of wrap does she need? Okay, we need to understand what we're trying to find, because this is 4 paragraphs of information, and I don't need all of that just to understand that one little question. Okay, next one, B, box any clue words. Okay, let me go back over here. I see square feet. Square feet, that's the key to all of this. The word area does not appear here. When are we using square feet? What is a square foot? All right, where are you going to show your students examples of square feet? You're going to point down to the tiles on the floor, and you're going to say, look, this is a 1 foot by 1 foot square. You're going to point up. You're going to say, look at the drop ceiling here in this classroom. You see these squares? That's square feet. It's how many of these squares that are 1 foot by 1 foot can we fit up on this ceiling or fit onto this floor? That's what area is. So you're trying to get them to link on to these questions so that they can actually figure out what kind of math they need to do. Evaluate. What steps do I have to take? We have to multiply. Do we have to divide? What are we doing? What are we using a formula from the formula sheet? How are we going to do this? And then we solve and check. Obviously, if we solve and we don't see our answer, we might need to look at it again. If we absolutely have no idea, then from my student, she says, PCMO, pick C, move on. If we really don't know what we're doing, we need to make a choice and move on. Okay. It's unpacking. We're not reading a book. What does every number mean? They have got to be dealing with these more difficult problems. Please, please, please do not think we can stay with this nice, simple little worksheet. This is not going to translate to that tree wrap. Try to get up there, even if you're just exposing them on the day. If this is where your ABE student is, and we're looking at question number 1, and 5 times 7, or even understanding 5 times 7 is already a big deal. I get it. I get it. They may be at this level, but we still have to try to expose them to the word problems. And I'm going to show you the print resources I use for that. Okay. moving on. Sorry, I'm taking too much time. I got to talk faster. All right, I'm going to go through these a ton of websites here. So now I'm going to jump out of this PowerPoint and then I'm going to just run you through some of these. If I can get to my first one. And I'm just going to go through them live here. So the first one that I always like to promote is IXL, and my computer is going to be slow because it wants to right now. IXL.com is a paid website. I only use things for free because I work in systems where we don't have a lot of money. It's a paid website, but your students can use it for free, and they can do 10 questions per computer per day. And then you can delete that browser history, erase the history, and then do 10 more if you want to. Okay, so I like to go right into the learning plan here. And you're going to see all the different grade levels. I think 7th and 8th grade is great for GED. Even if you're in corrections and your computer has internet, then you can still use this because you can project it onto the screen. There are tons of different problems here. And what I like about it is that I don't really have time to be making PowerPoints with things like graphs and charts and things like that, because even if I'm screen printing, that's going to take me forever. This is something that I can just throw up on the board and boom, we have 10 practice questions to go over. You know, I don't have time to recreate this type of word problem in a practice test. Let me zoom out, or I'm sorry, on a PowerPoint. So this just makes a real easy way for me to throw up a skill onto the board and go over it with students. And pretty much there's not going to be any math concept that you cannot find on this website in terms of GED. And I'm going to just get this one wrong and submit it just to show you that when students are working on it, as soon as they get it wrong, it's going to say, sorry, you're wrong. And then it's going to give them an answer explanation. So I like that, and it's a good thing to use for free. Again, if you're in corrections and your students can't get on it, but you can project from the internet, then you could still use it as you're teaching to throw questions up on the board. Going really fast through the next one, CUDA software is a great place for free worksheets, and so is Common Core Sheets, which of course I loaded all of this and it's going to be slow now. Common Core Sheets has a lot of cool ABE level worksheets, but I also like, if you can see here, this one at a time feature when you click on any topic. And again, it's another way that we can throw up one question on the board. So even if you're in a system where your students cannot access the internet, you can do this just to throw up practice on the board. And to me, it's way easier than making a PowerPoint. And you could also print a ton of worksheets from here. And the last one that I had here, I think, was math drills, which is just another place for free worksheets. Again, ABE level, if you want them to do 30 or 40 or 50 multiplication practice, fractions, decimals, things like that, which I do think is good. It just cannot be the only thing that we do. We must then translate into the harder word problem level. Okay, the GED math video page. I'm going to quickly talk about that. I'll show you it here. This is developed through the Florida Literacy Coalition, and basically this started with a cool GED YouTube playlist. And so what we did was we just corralled all those Khan Academy math videos, and of course there are millions of Khan Academy math videos, so we just pulled the ones that are GED appropriate. So the good thing about this is that it's a collection designed for ABE and GED students, and here's those same content areas of the GED math test. And when you click on it, there's a pre-test and a post-test that students can take there, and that's just GED style practice questions that they can answer. They'll see their results right away if they got them right or wrong. And when they open up the sections, they can see a collection of Khan Academy videos that are standards aligned to the GED test. Now, while I'm showing you this, I'll also show you that the most recent development of this is an app. So I'm going to use this program called Let's View, and I am going to show you my phone. And I'm going to show you very quickly that we also have this in an app version. So let me get this loaded and then you will see it here. So here it is for you. And what you can also do, the good thing about this is that we've got the same thing in an app. You see at the bottom of the screen, the navigation is very simple. It's basically the same thing that is on the website, so students can click on any of the sections. They will see the pretest and the quiz. I'll just go ahead and open that one of those there. You can see they can launch the pretest, and basically they can do everything on their phone and watch the YouTube videos and everything like that. So that's just a cool resource. It's 100% free, and it's hosted on the Florida Literacy Coalition page. So it's there and it's going to be free forever. And so this is very cool. And we know that students don't have computers at home, they have apps. So just want to make mention of that. Okay, next is Hamlin Math, which I just closed. So let me reopen it. This is definitely good for those of you in corrections. And Nicole and I remember that teacher who said, what can we do for under the door, because he teaches in corrections through a steel door. So if you're looking for stuff to print, this is a cool website where this teacher has put in all these notes under this resource section. And a lot of these sections have notes and practice questions built in. So if you were looking for something to just print out for your students and you just wanted to give them some notes to take with them and take home to practice, he's got all these notes with practice questions, and I just think it's a good resource. Okay, running so low on time, so I'm gonna instead of demonstrating this, I'm just going to talk about these next ones. I was going to do it with you. We all know Kahoot.com, I think. Let me redo this. Kahoot.com is going to allow you, sorry, let me get rid of this. Kahoot.com is going to allow you to play free games with your students. There are upgraded versions, but free games with your students. And the way that I do it is I just search for the quizzes that other teachers have made. So once you take 5 minutes to create this an account, you can go in this discover section that you see at the top left, and you can search for anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and search one-step equations, because I already know equations is such a huge section. And then you're going to see all these quizzes developed by other teachers. And when you click on one of them, you'll be able to see the questions, and then you can start a game with students. Now, a lot of people already know about Kahoot. So I also want to just take a moment to mention Blookit. I wish this would load before I get off of it. Let me see if I can wait for that while I talk about Blookit. Kahoot developed a second site called Blookit, and it is also free. And this is Blookit, and we can go to discover sets. And again, I'm going to search one-step equations. And for any of you that are interested in the games, academic games with students, you can start these games, and unlike Kahoot, you can pick different styles of games. And I know that we teach adults, and adults don't always like kiddie stuff, but sometimes they do. And sometimes if you're in the middle of a 3-hour class, you want something else. So there's just games. And what I do like about Blookit is that the games are different than, or I'm sorry, what I do like about Blookit versus Kahoot is always the same. They just see one question at a time on the screen. But with Blookit, it's a game. And actually, while the students are playing the game, the teacher doesn't have to keep clicking next, 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 next. You just kind of set it, and then the students are playing the game, and you can sort of walk around. But they're answering questions. And you can see the classic version. That's what Kahoot looks like. But in Blookit, you have more stuff. So if you're looking for those academic games, you've got it there. And I'm sorry I don't have time to actually play with you, because we're going to have a big challenge, but I'm going to keep running because I've got a lot more stuff for you. I also just want to mention academics. This one is super duper kiddie, but if you're stuck in the room in the middle of, on a Friday, and you've got 16, 17, 18-year-olds left, and all of your older adults left, and you just have, probably a bunch of young people in the room. There's a lot of subjects in here. They can do fractions, they can do multiplication and things like that. And they're just little races. And you can create a class where just your students are racing. And it's just kind of fun and just a break, just a brain break. So those are 3 different brain breaks: Kahoot, Book It, and Academics. Just quick little things. And I mean, I like efficient learning, but I'll take a little brain break every now and then and play a game, you know, in the middle of a 3-hour class. Okay, I want to mention whiteboard.fi. And I'm going to show you, this is what happens when you log into this website. I'm going to click new class. I'm going to show you how long it takes to set this up. I typed my name earlier. So that's it. You just type your name, create new class, and then your students are going to log in. And I am going to show you what happens when students log in. Sorry, did that not work? Let me try again. I think it saved it from earlier. Okay, so your students are going to log in, and yes, they can log in on their phones. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now on my phone just to show you. And they just need to type this code. You see that website, they can type it into their phone. So that end part where it says F9688, that's going to be the key to this particular room. And so I am going to go in and I am going to show you my whiteboard. So this is basically a space for a digital whiteboard. And I'm going to, let me go ahead and I'm just going to set this up because it's just unique because I was playing with it earlier. Okay, so here's a whiteboard, and down here at the bottom, you are going to see the students. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to put in a practice question by just throwing in a photo, and I just have one photo of a word problem. And then as my students log in, what is going to happen is they're going to see this page on their screen, and they are going to be able to write their answers on this. And then they are going to be able to, I am going to see their screens down here. So here's one of the students' screens down here. And so basically, if you are compelled to teach or tutor in a distance learning setting, you've got this free program where you can write on it, you can circle, you can throw in a word problem. And then at the bottom, which again, I don't have time to get all of you in, but at the bottom, you will see your students down here. And you will see all of their screens, and so they can individually be solving the program, and you will see what they are doing there. So there are a lot of benefits to this if you have to teach at a distance, and that's whiteboard.fi. Okay, moving right along. I have to make mention of Khan Academy, of course, because it's free for everyone forever. That's their mentality, and they yeah, and yes, you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint at the end. Khan Academy, if you click on courses, they have so much math. For most students, 7th, 8th, and Algebra 1 is going to be where you're going to float for GED. I have used this as a student, and I have used it as a teacher. It is a great practice, and Khan Academy has a ton of stuff that is going to be GED appropriate because they're putting in a lot more word problems. I'm going to click on one of these and just show you how I would tell students to use it. Khan Academy always puts these mastery challenges in, like you can start the challenges. But what I tell students is here are all the different lessons, and I would recommend reviewing them, especially if it was Algebra 1, for example, or pre-algebra. I would say go ahead and go into the lessons, because if they just keep clicking on this top thing, this mastery challenge, they're never going to get everything. The mastery challenge is a review of what they've already done. This is the new stuff, so they need to be clicking through here. And I would say just click on the top and then go through the lessons in here. Okay, and I would say just go in order, go in order. So that's how I like to just make sure they're using it correctly. And while I'm at it, even though this is math, I have to plug readtheory.org because I love it. Students take an 8-question pretest and then they can work on informational texts and reading comprehension on their specific level based upon that pretest. They have another free for everyone forever. And the reason I had to plug it in this session, even though it's math, is because they recently added this worksheet section and they put in ABE. And I'm so happy to see that because almost always we just get K-12 stuff, but they actually put ABE and ESL in there. So I had to plug them for this because I was so happy that they considered adult ed. Of course, we can use the stuff in other grade levels too. 7, 8, 9 is a really great level for GED, but we have ABE. That's awesome. Okay, so readtheory.org. And then you have seen me working on Let's View. So when I did the screen mirroring, you saw my phone on my screen because I am using a program called Let's View, and it is free and it is very easy to use. And that's why you were able to see my phone and that application. So if you're looking for that type of productivity tool, you have that. And again, that's why over here you can see my phone. And as I'm scrolling, you can see everything. And I was able to show you that app. And you saw me with whiteboard.fi. This is what the student looks like. The student experience looked like. I was drawing on it very sloppily with my finger. And so that's there. And let me jump actually back into the PowerPoint now because I have a couple more things in the PowerPoint. So we've gone through a lot of this. All these websites that I just showed you are here in the PowerPoint, just to remind you. Okay, so you're not going to forget. And I have all the links there and everything. So I put it there anyway. So sorry, I didn't have more time to like show you more about these, but some of them are very cool. Really quickly about the print resources. Again, we have to get them up to that GED level. I absolutely love this Score Boost series. It's developed by New Readers Press and their nonprofit. The Score Boost for GED, the green ones for math, and the orange ones are my favorite. We kind of like the blue, not that much. The critical thinking orange one and the algebraic reasoning green one are my top twos for GED. And what I really like about this is that they're 2-page lessons. It's the same thing for the TABE ones. Actually, I think the TABE ones do, the Score Boost for TABE do 4-page lessons, but that's cool because it's very short lessons. And I tell a student, once you turn the page, you're on a new lesson. So if you could just do one a day, there's about 15 lessons in here. There are more than that in here. And these are consumable packets, but I find them to be really good to give students that overview of everything that they're going to encounter on the GED and see GED style questions that are harder and longer questions and things like that. So what these Score Boosts do is they start with a couple simple things and then they get longer questions. Okay, favorite print resources for GED. I already talked about Score Boost. We love these big Kaplan books. A lot of us teach that we have a class set of these Kaplan books and we'll teach through the lessons and then we'll supplement those lessons. And the reason that we do that is because in these books, you see GED style questions, you see the harder, longer word problems, and then we can supplement with those easier worksheets to get them up to that level, but we still need to expose them to those harder word problems. This Kaplan book in particular, if you don't have it, is something that you will probably get because to me, it's a favorite. I love these old school Common Core basics developed by McGraw-Hill. The Achieve to me is too high. The Basics is good. And real quickly, just to throw some stuff together about student engagement. I always love to do hands-on stuff with students. I like whiteboards. I love clear clipboards. Imagine a clear clipboard with a piece of graph paper on one side and you write on the plastic side with an Expo marker. I love those little whiteboards. It just gets them out of the worksheet mode for any of you that are able to do it. I love these red and yellow dots for teaching integers. Red is negative, yellow is positive. And all of these ideas for these buckets actually came from Ron Cruz. If you ever get a chance to attend one of his math PDs, do it because he's an amazing presenter. This is a picture of me writing on the table, which my students always freak out about, but the expo markers erase really well off of a lot of our glossy tables and they freak out, but then I can really see it because they like to write so small and it's just easier for me to see it. So sometimes I make them do that, whatever it takes to get them engaged. I really like these foldables for notes. Again, as we looked in some of those word problems, something like square foot, that is something that is a vocabulary thing. And if you don't know that that is related to area, then you're just not going to answer that question. You're not going to know what to do. So I like foldables, and I really do like foldables too, because they slow me down. I'm always trying to frantically get so much information into their heads because their attendance is so terrible and I don't see them that often. But foldables slow me down and remind me that I need to slow down and let them process through things like vocabulary and then make them write down notes, which they don't want to do, but they have to because they need to remember. So that's why I like this. And there are a million examples of foldables online, including ones that you can print out if you want to. I don't like to print and just hand because I don't think that's the point, but they are there if you want them. And with our students, one year I was working on this amazing GED team, and we just did every other kind of thing that we could to try to engage them. We gave them challenges that we found online. They built catapults. We did a lot of circumference, weight, measurement, and those types of things with pumpkins, and then we decorated them. We read stories about the three sisters, which were ancient growing techniques, gardening techniques, farming techniques. And then we grew some seeds. This is called the Marshmallow Challenge. If you've ever seen it, it's kind of cool. We did Black History Month posters, just trying to get them involved and not, a lot of these students have not had a great experience with educational systems. They're not especially academic people. So any way to create some kind of fun for them, they probably missed out on a lot of fun. For example, if you're an underperforming student, they take away your electives and they dump you in intensive reading and intensive math, and you miss some of the fun that you could have had in those electives. So it's just nice to kind of try to bring those things back in, even if they are adults and it seems silly to be making a poster and presenting it in front of the class. Obviously, you can see the results of these posters. They're beautiful and they got into it and it made them work as a group, and we really liked that too. Okay, so that's kind of bringing me to the end. I talked about the productivity tools. I have to talk about Adobe Scan. It's a free app. If you ever need to go to the copier to scan something, stop. Download Adobe app, Adobe Scan. You're basically taking a picture of whatever you want, a math book, and within about 45 seconds, you have got that picture converted into a PDF and you can email it to yourself. It's amazing. This is my #1 app at work. Google Voice is my #2 app at work. Most of you can use your Gmail or your school email account if it's hooked to Google to get a free phone number. And then you can text students with that phone number, and you can also just text them straight from your school computer. So your phone doesn't even have to be involved in this, but what you're giving out to students is a phone number. And we found for tracking students, it's way easier to have that phone number than it is to try to get them to use an email. And they'll text you back, and you can turn it on and off. So at the end of the night, you don't need to be taking these texts anymore, and you're not giving out your personal number. And I never used my personal account to create my Google Voice. So there's a very firm barrier between me and students, but I have those lines of communication. So I always have to plug Google Voice. We talked about Let's View, and that brings me to the end with 2 minutes to spare. I'm so excited. Okay. So thank you so much for joining. I know that was so much information. It's just because I love math and I love GED, and I just want to pack it all in there. I'm going to use whatever remaining time we have, and I'm willing to stay here if you have any questions. But I know Nicole is going to give you the presentation that has all the links. So I know I went too fast for some of it, but you have the links there. All of the websites that I show, I promise They take minutes. They do not take hours. I don't deal with anything that takes hours. They take minutes to actually start using them in your classroom. So please check them out. I hope you saw one thing that you really liked that you thought was cool. You have my email on the screen. You can email me at any time. I love to hear from you, even if it's in 1 year from now that you think of a question. I still want to hear from you. And thank you so much for joining today. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to let Nicole say goodbye to you. But if you do have questions, I'm perfectly willing to stay here and try to answer any of your questions. So please hit me with your questions. I see the chat rolling, and I'm going to start reading. So thank you so much. And Nicole, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We have some stuff in the chat, mostly comments. So I will go ahead and post our.
Oh, we lost you, Nicole. We can't, you muted.
Wow, okay. Anyway, I posted the survey in the chat, so please take the evaluation. At the bottom of the evaluation is where you request a survey. So make sure that you click that and open it, but also please submit the survey. So it's, you know, you can copy and paste the link into another URL, but please remember to click submit on the survey. If you accidentally go through the whole survey and forget to click that link, no problem, just email me and I will send you the link to request your certificate. So I'd also like to share, we have a couple of things coming up. We have a couple of different opportunities. We have a two-part webinar series coming up later in June, developing an impactful two-generation family literacy program. So this is going to be a two-part series on developing a family literacy program. If you are interested, or if you think someone in your program might be interested in this, the facilitator is going to be Dr. Jacqueline Lynch, and she is a co-author of Teaching and Learning About Family Literacy and Family Literacy Programs. So I highly recommend you attend that. We also, along with that, are announcing our family literacy planning grants. So these are grants for up to $2,500 to help your program start the planning process of implementing a family literacy program. You know that family literacy programs are typically more intensive to implement than other programs. So that's why we'd like to offer this resource. It is a competitive grant process, and you can find more information about that on the session. So thank you, Greg. Greg went ahead and posted both of these links in the chat. We also have a webinar, Reading Strategies for Struggling Readers. If you were at our conference, one of our presenters, Talia Cotton, will be presenting that session. She was probably the biggest hit of our conference. So she agreed to do a webinar for us, for those of you who weren't at our conference or didn't see her session. So Rebecca, are there any questions that you'd like to address?
I think I got the couple that were there. So I think we've actually already answered. If there are any more questions, then feel free to type them now. And if any of you are asking, Nicole did post the PowerPoint PDF in the chat, so you can retrieve it from there.
Yeah,
yep,
I went ahead and did it again, just so it's at the bottom now. All right, so I went ahead and posted it again, so you should be able to download it. We'll send it via email afterwards anyway. So if there are no more questions, thank you all so much for joining us, and have a wonderful long weekend if you're having a long weekend.